atlas right here. All right. And on page 74. Excuse me. Page 74. I always said, liquid, read things with common sense. All right. This is deserts. Go down here. The light total focus on it. There you go. All right, we're gonna go up a little bit right here. I'm gonna read this now. Get a good focus here. Get a good image of it. Desert climates and landscape. All right. In the subtropical latitudes, swept by hot, drying winds, high pressure weather systems prevent rain clouds from forming. In these regions, rain comes only from local storms or follows low pressure weather systems, often seasonal. When they move in across the desert, large areas of Central Asia have become desert because they are so far from the sea that clouds have shed all their rain before they reach them. Other deserts occur because the mountains cut them off from moisture-bearing winds. The Andes, for example, shelter the dry lands of Argentina, and the High Sierra stops rain from reaching the Mojave and the Great Basin Desert of North America. Rain is also rare on the western sides of the continents where cold ocean current flows from the polar regions towards the equator. Desert climates vary not only from place to place but also with time. Over short periods, rainfall is much less predictable than it is in the temperate regions, and droughts are frequent. Some droughts, such as those that occur along the southern fringes of the Sahara, are so severe that it may seem that the climate has changed permanently, but most droughts are short-lived and are followed by years of normal, although sparse, rainfall. Over longer periods of time, however, desert climates do change. Prehistoric cave drawings in the Saharan highlands, for example, show that elephants, rhinoceros, and even hippopotamuses, animals that are at home in wetter climates, lived in those now dry, barren uplands in a more moist period between 7,000 and 4,000 years ago. Desert landscapes also vary enormously. They are contrasted as the Colorado Canyon country of the United States and the sandy wastes of the Middle East, but most include one or more severe basic features: steep, rocky mountain slopes, broad plains, basin floors dominated by dry lake beds or sand seas, and the canyon-like valleys. In low-lying areas, evaporation sometimes leaves a glistening residue of salt. Where there is soil, it is often sandy or consists of little more than fragmented rock. And because plant life is usually sparse, there is little or no humus to enrich the ground. Okay. Now, what I just read, and I explained this before, is how what is now known as, when you have the Sahara Desert, you hear goofballs talking about, use the term sub-Saharan Africa. That shit. A lot of these terms are like basically racist terminology. So they created an ancient Mason-Dixon line in Africa, or so-called Black Africa, where the Negroes are. But I just read that Sahara Desert was not always there. All right, that the area dried up, and you had images of rock art painting of hippopotamuses, rhinoceros, and other. Well, in a region where it was more wet-like at the time, but other animals who were more water-based animals, and they show people fishing in that region. Now, I mentioned this before, how that area was more wet, but now it's dry. That was one of the Great Lake regions over there in Africa, and also how geologists put in a large pipeline deep down, and they was able to pump some water out of it because it's buried deep under the sand. Here you have it in Americas, which I said in certain regions where you had boats near these areas where there's now desert, where there's large rocks was carved into, obviously were carved into using steel or they form of iron. Excuse me. had their former iron there, was that they were able to get there by boat, but now those regions have dried up. See, over time, a lot of those regions, which was once wetland, which now have dried up to now just basically a dry, deserted desert. And when you see these images there, when people have carved and cut into, many people just cannot fathom that they were carved and cut into, and how did they carry those materials to their location. I often mention the fact in my other videos how they use the many different riverbeds, and some of the riverbeds have dried up, and obviously they use the river channels. Like I said before, you have the Mississippi River, and there's many different tributaries to the river where you exit off a highway, you exit on those different tributaries to that river as you travel within North America. This is information that's in your face. All you gotta do is do the research. So when you get these clowns sit there and tell you that, quote, that most so-called black people just came over here as slaves, that's a goddamn lie. We were already over here. But also you had some people who did sell over here. They weren't brought over as slaves, but they did sell over here. Once that area in Africa, because you had people over there in West Africa, once that area dried up, you did have people with ships selling out. So some of them sailed across, or they used the currents to sail and to circulate over here to the America. So you had people here, you had people selling over here, coming back and forth, selling back and forth. When one area dries up, and the life source, where it comes the human life source becomes a fishery and all that stuff with the water base, because with the water you have your you're able to sail by boat, and you also to engage in hunting for fish. Once that area dried up, then you had to relocate to another area. So people kept relocating. All right. So you had Negroes already over here. Then when this area dried up, Negroes was coming, sailing across the sea from one land over to another land. That's why I always say that you had different types of black people here in the Americas. And you had black people here selling out to other places. You had black people from other areas selling to here. It always happened. We didn't originate over here as no damn slaves. That's a lie. So when you hear these Negroes say that, when you hear clowns like Home Team History, and that From Nothing Bozo tell you that majority of your ancestors came over in the slave ship, that's a goddamn lie. But see, they obviously have not done no critical research and critical studying to realize that our ancestors built various different types of ships to sail the seas. That was done. It wasn't impossible. That was done. And he sailed to different places. And I talked about the Sahara drying up the water because you have very different water beds. That happened here in America, like I said. Very different regions, even in South America. You had places that had water once there, now it's dried up. That happened all over. So it's nothing new. Once, like certain places were above sea level, now it's under sea level. But there's obviously docking ports where ships used to dock at. So this information is nothing new, what I'm giving you. All right. The ancestors were way more advanced than we're giving credit to, but they've been simplified by white racist historians who want to downplay, since they weren't white and as obviously were Negro, they want to downplay their accomplishments and their achievements, so they just make them into some primitive idiots. So this is why it's very important to study history and do not listen to these punk-ass charlatans who will just tell you, I don't study, I don't care about the Olmecs, who cares about the Olmecs and their culture? I didn't care less. Peace and love, brothers and sisters.